very tentative. Last week, Zoom decided to melt down in the middle of our show, and that was fun. Boy, sure enjoyed doing that. But I think we're here. We've got. Hey, I'm even going to dare to try out a sound effect. And they're off. All right.
We're off on the show, and we're off on summer, and yay, and all that.
And all of that good stuff. Welcome to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. So happy to be to be here and to be on the microphone today, which is fine with me. Okay, folks, it is really good. Let's set up one more thing. That was you, Peggy.
We finally came up on Facebook, so that was me hitting volume off.
Volume off. Oh, we just got on Facebook. Okay.
Yes.
And we're very pleased today. We've got just a few seconds here, which means I have just enough time to play something like.
Shut up, Wesley.
Okay, there we go. We're very pleased to have an old friend, Tom Ogren, who's going to start us off today. If you're sneezing out there, it's not coronavirus, probably. No, it's not, because that's not sneezing. That's coughing.
Not sneezing, yeah.
But if you're coughing, it might not be coronavirus. It might be allergies.
If you walk around going all the time.
He's going to tell us about plants that maybe you shouldn't have in your yard. I've been talking with Tom about this for about 15 years. And it bears repeating. So stick around. Tom Ogren will be with us with Allergy-Free Gardening. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy.
On social media at Gabby Road Radio.
Mr. Sandman, bring us vaccines. We need a cure for COVID-19. We're losing hope, the world is in peril. We want to hug you, only that's not sterile. Sandman.
Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Now that is a bump that we tried to play last week, and it got cut off right at the beginning and just kind of went. And I was on the
phone. Like
how? Just like that. In fact,
This is not normal.
It's not normal, Mr. President. And that's by 8th grader Melody Hamilton, somewhere in the country, who did multi-tracked herself, singing all of the parts to Mr. Sandman, the COVID tribute there. And we've got more of those on the show today. I'm thinking I might start phasing out those, though. However, I'm almost at the point where it's too much, and I'm not sure I want to do that anymore. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Welcome to the show. Very pleased to have an old friend with us today, and he has spanned. I want to say, and I don't know exactly because I don't have records from when we first talked at the Gargantua Radio down the dial. But we did when I was at the really big radio station. Then I was at a slightly smaller radio station. Now I'm at a slightly bigger radio station again. And his name is Tom Ogren, or Thomas Leo Ogren, or Tommy Ogren. Tom, I can't keep track of all your names.
Yeah, it gets difficult, Before computers, it didn't matter, but a computer only so Tom Ogren goes down as a whole different person if you Google me as Thomas Leo and whatever. So my friends call me Tommy, but you can call me anything as long as you smile.
Well, I was wondering about that. I thought maybe you had to take Tommy because that was the only Facebook name available, and sometimes that happens. I mean, I couldn't even get my own name for Twitter, but so it became Mike now, and you're Tommy Ogren. So I will. It'll probably be Tom, is what I'm thinking today. That's all right with you?
That'll work just fine.
Tom is the mastermind behind something called Allergy-Free Gardening. And I know you've told the story a gazillion times, and I don't want to bore you with it, but it had to do with your wife. So you can quickly go through that, and then that'll get us up to speed. But it starts with your wife, who has severe allergies, right?
Right. My wife, her name is Yvonne, and we've been married 53 years now.
Whoa. You get a ding.
Got married when we were babies. Yeah.
When you were 6 years old. That's I don't. I,
Yeah.
They allow that.
It's amazing, and we made it work. But yeah, she has asthma and very bad allergies, and she would have asthma attacks when she was having the allergies the worst, because she had what they call allergic asthma. And I thought that the allergies were a head trip because I had read a book by a doctor that said allergies were psychosomatic, and I didn't have allergies or asthma. So
Tommy, can I stop you there for a second? What's amazing about that, you read that book, and that was even before the internet. Imagine if you had just been getting all your information off the internet, you'd have never gone over to actually look at the science.
Absolutely. I had been researching this 15 years before I even had a computer. So, yeah, no, but yeah, I had to use books. I would go to the libraries, these universities, and I'd go through their stacks, and I'd pull out books that had been sitting there for 25 years and had about a half inch of dust on top and had never been read, much less checked out, and I would check them out and read them. I read every possible thing that I could read for years and years and years. But back to the psychosomatic thing, I wasn't very sympathetic to my wife when she had asthma because of that stupid attitude of mine that it was mental, and somehow she it was almost dying, but I'm like, oh, but it's mental, And one time I was in Berkeley, California, and I was doing a landscape job, and I had some time off. I worked on my vacations, and everybody was sick. It seemed like everybody was having allergies, asthma. The guys digging the trenches that I hired everybody was sneezing except me. And we finished the job, and it was springtime. There were a lot of acacia trees blooming. And I was driving back to San Luis Obispo, a couple 100 miles, and I was thinking about it, and I thought, tomorrow I'm going to do sniff tests with my students if they'll go. I was teaching in a prison, teaching horticulture and landscape gardening in Paso Robles. And so the next day I got with my students and I said, let's take all kinds of flowers out of the garden. Let's systematically sniff these flowers and see if anything does anything to anybody. And everybody said, yeah, that's a great idea. And so we sniffed some pansies and nothing happened. We did some double petunias and nothing happened. And I was starting to think, yeah, it's all baloney. And then we did some red bottle brush, callistemon. And the third fellow that sniffed it, and he was a big muscular gangbanger crip from LA, and he sniffed it and he sneezed so hard he almost fell down. Everybody started laughing. We thought it was pretty funny. But by the time we went around the class with the bottle brush plant and people took direct sniffs, fully 1/3 of the class was sneezing. And that was on a Monday, and they were still sneezing on Friday.
Wow.
And right then I knew, whoa, this wasn't psychosomatic, and it wasn't about women being hysterical and all that baloney that I've been reading about. Heck no, this was a real thing. And if you got the particular pollen up your nose, you're going to get the symptoms. It didn't matter if you were psychologically a giant. That doctor was full of baloney. It was not psychological. The allergy, the asthma was 100% real, and it could be triggered by particular things. So shortly after that, I was at another library, and I had been told there was an article on allergy-free gardening somewhere in one of these nursery magazines. I wanted to read it because I couldn't find anything. And I'm looking through magazine after magazine, finding the research librarian says, well, what exactly are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for an article about allergy-free gardening. And she started to laugh. I said, well, hey, what's so funny? And she said, it's the gardens that cause all the allergies. And I said, I don't know much about this, but this is what I have figured out so far. The gardens are made out of a lot of different plants, and some of them cause allergies and some don't. and I want to know the difference. And she said, oh, okay. And that was the very beginning. But as soon as we sniff tested that first fellow that went off on the bottle brush, I knew right then there was a huge difference between exposure to one type of flower and exposure to another. Some didn't do anything. Some like took your head off. And that's how I got it. And then I just decided to dig into it,
and then you devoted what, the next 25 years of your life to this.
Yeah, right. The rest of my life I've been digging into it.
If you did that today, you'd have had your pantsuit off by the class, and you would have been kicked out of the college altogether, and you'd be on the street right now.
Well, actually, I got my master's degree when I was fairly old, and I was totally working on plant flowering systems and allergy at that point. And my professors thought I was full of baloney, but pretty soon I got to know a lot more about it than they did. And so it was kind of easy sailing, but
it's not. Let me stop you there, because in the 15 years or so since you and I have been talking about this, right. I have and believe me, I'm a convert. You have changed my view of the horticultural world in a way that very few people have. Doug Tallamy is one of those people. Actually, Jeff Lowenfels with Teaming with Microbes was another guy who changed my view of the world. There's
mine too.
About 4 or 5 people who have written books and expounded philosophies of gardening that have made me think, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. And yours is one of them. However, I still get horticulturists who say, oh, that guy's nuts.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've never had people that listened to, say, a whole lecture by me and were able to ask questions that when I was done still thought I was nuts. It was people maybe didn't understand the whole big picture. There are people that simply have never had any allergies, and they are very unsympathetic to it. And there's a lot of people in horticulture that have vested interests, unfortunately. So we have large tree companies that when I go to conferences, I've seen the same people for 20 years. They won't even say hello to me. No, they act like I'm the enemy, And
there are going to be a lot of people in the horticultural world who are going to treat you that way simply because they refuse to get real. All right, let me put it this way. I went to a horticultural conference a few years ago where we were talking about invasive plants, and we were talking about Caliper pears. All right, and you know what a scourge Caliper pears. If you have a Bradford pear, there are other kinds of Caliper pears out there. And these researchers are showing photos of freeways in Ohio where the Caliper pears have taken over the intersections, not the paved part, but anything else around the paved part. It's all Caliper pears. And the industry people are going, well, it's not really invasive. What do you mean? Take a look at the photo. And so when they were asked, they were asked, are you going to get rid of your inventory? And they say, well, how about 5 years? Can you give us 5 years? We've got a lot of inventory here. And I'm thinking, it's already taking over the country. And this is kind of the horticultural world. It's like, yeah, we can't afford to lose money. And boy, and I feel sympathetic to them, especially looking at the world during this pandemic, where a lot of places have had to shut down or have marginal connections to their customers now. But still, science is science, isn't it, Tommy?
It is, but money is money, and money seems to trump science, unfortunately, a lot. And as far as like invasive plants, I can go to any nursery around here and find them selling privets, and privets have gone totally invasive. They're in all the creek beds and everything, and privets everywhere now. And this, not just here, you go down south, there's just massive amounts of privets, and some places in the southern states you walk in, and every plant underfoot is Japanese Hall's honeysuckle. millions of acres, but they keep selling. You go to the Walmart and they're selling it right there in the store. Despite the fact that we know something to be correct, doesn't mean in horticulture that it changes. Unfortunately, that's they continue to grow and sell the most allergenic trees.
And so right. All right. And we have like a minute and 15 seconds here. So we'll get a start on that. And you say they grow and sell allergenic trees. What are you talking about? This is the time of year when trees leaf out. And of course, a lot of them produce pollen. What kind of trees are you talking?
Okay. The number one thing.
It depends where you're on the country too, of course.
Okay, well, yeah, all around the entire country, and not just here, but other countries to boot. I've spoken in dozens of countries now. And
you've done a lot of work in Canada.
Yeah, and Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, and 5 trips to Europe and to speak on this. But anytime plants can be separate sexed, they always grow just the male trees. And then we have this preponderance of male trees. And we also have trees in nature that are not separate sexed, like a honey locust tree. One branch is male, one branch is female. But the propagators in horticulture make all the cuttings only from the male branch.
All right, and we're gonna leave it right there, Tommy. Tom Ogren talking allergy-free gardening.
Financially, many of these provide access to mobile banking.
I thought I saw something from Kelsey Shaw earlier.
Yeah, Kelsey said it was actually on the post, the show promotion post. He said, "Thank you for covering this important topic."
Oh, good. I thought he was going to criticize or something.
No.
It's like,
visit chase.com
and take a look at that.
And Scott's watching us, and he says heavy rains are promoting much anthracnose on ash and sycamore.
I got an anthracnose tree right here that just every year.
The sycamore?
I'm Dr. Anthony.
No, it's a hybrid elm.
Climate Connection.
And it just I've got 2 hybrid elms right next to each other in the same parkway.
During
the city
summer
put in probably 20
residents often enjoy a refreshing
odd years ago. One of them
5.9 FM.
This is a big one.
Well, it all seemed harmless for a couple of days. Then it all got real when it got Tom Hanks. Now we can't shake hands and we can't even sneeze, 'cause everyone will freak out and put us in quarantine. We're all locked down, baby, and we're trying to get out. Going back crazy 'cause I can't leave the house. I got a cooler of beer, my baby's drinking that wine. Yeah, washing my hands about 24 times. It gets worse every day that I turn.
Yeah, welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Molecki. That's the coronavirus song by Buddy Brown from Truck Sessions. I needed a little country flavor in there, so threw that in there. We are in San Luis Obispo, California. Well, I'm not, but our guest is Tom Ogren. And he is the author of 3 books, which we haven't mentioned yet. Safe Sex in the Garden, Allergy-Free Gardening, and The Allergy Fighting Garden. And we just got to the idea of why. And of course, the worst part of this right now, Tom, and partly why I wanted you on the show is we're talking allergies, but we're at a point where we have a respiratory pandemic going on in the country. And that has to really freak a lot of people out who can't tell the difference or have a hard time telling the difference, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say the main symptom difference is with the virus, you will get a bad headache and a fever. And with allergies, that's not a symptom. You rarely see fever and high temperature as the symptom of allergies. All the other things that are very similar. And for people with asthma, and I'm in contact with a lot of them, they are terrified, just terrified, Mike, of the idea of getting this virus into their lungs. People with asthma have a hard time breathing anyhow. And all the people with COPD or something, all these different lung issue people, the idea of getting this virus is terrifying. And all the people I know that have allergies are being very, very, very careful about all the social distancing and everything.
Yeah. I can certainly understand that. And when we left you before the break, you were talking about which trees and plants produce pollen. You were talking about male versus female. And you're talking about dioecious trees, correct?
Yeah, dioecious, Latin for two houses, right? So, like a red maple tree, one tree is all male and it makes pollen. The other tree is all female and she makes seeds. And if you take red maple tree, I want to back off just a second for the listeners. But in the 1960s, we had the Dutch elm disease spread across the United States like wildfire. Took about 10 years to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it killed off almost all our street trees. When I was a boy, all the street trees, pretty near all of them, were American elms.
Yeah.
Trees. And they caused a little bit of allergy, but not too much, and they were insect pollinated and so on. But then they just died off by the millions, and they were replaced with what the universities pushed as smart trees. And so, like the United States Department of Agriculture, Beltsville, Maryland, produced over 100 clones just of red maple alone that they put on the market. And of those 100, how many do you think were female?
None.
None. All of them were male clones. They were all
Yeah.
they were all new and improved, hence seed.
Why was that?
Well, because this way, if you planted that red maple tree out front, it wouldn't drop any seeds on the sidewalk, so it was clean, it was tidy. And then they did this with all kinds of other plants too, all the way from the trees to the begonias. And and then, like I said before, they figured out how to do it out of plants that were not dioecious. So you take, where I live, you have all these Italian cypress, these tall, skinny cypress trees, look like a juniper or something. And in nature, they always, from seed, they'll always have male and female on the same tree, but the propagators figured out they could take the cuttings and grow them from cuttings from the lower branches, which are male, and then the whole thing would be seedless and even neater and cleaner and tidier and nicer and
Yeah.
win, but they weren't thinking about the pollen issue.
No, they weren't, obviously. And so in the interest of neatness, and I went back and looked at my notes when we talked in 2012, when I was at Progresso Radio down the dial. And I wrote that in the interest of neatness, we've decided that tens of millions of people should live in misery. And that's the trade-off of it, because we're neatness freaks in this country. Especially when it comes to our plants. Oh my God, there's helicopters on the sidewalk. I can't live anymore with that. And whatever fruit. Now, the only real dangerous fruit might be the female ginkgo, but as you point out, the male ginkgo produces a lot of pollen.
Oh, I also said, if you look at it, like, I've been in cities where they planted thousands of ginkgos and every single one was a male. And I asked the question, what would happen if they had planted thousands of ginkgos and every single one was a female and they planted no males? How much of that fruit would you get?
You'd get none, because you wouldn't have any pollination.
Exactly. So you would have got
very
no
much.
mess.
Thank you. No prompting at all. I figured that out on my own.
You're getting all the answers right. But yeah, so my point is that they could have done it. They could have gone all female plants and not planted any of the males, and they would have got very little mess, and they wouldn't have caused all this pollen issue. But if you plant literally millions of male trees whose job is to produce pollen and pollinate females, and so one male tree may put out 100 or 1,000 times more pollen than a tree that's not all male. And it puts all this pollen out to the females, which trap pollen, but they don't plant any females. Then what sort of situation do you have? You have what we have right now. You have millions of male trees, almost no female trees in the urban environments. You have all the pollen flying around. It doesn't have its natural source. You have no balance. and the receptors end up being people, and then pollen gets in our eyes and our nose. I mean, when I started this, I was doing it all because of my wife and her allergies. I didn't have any allergies. In the last couple of years, I'm developing allergies, and it's not from hanging around in my yard. Yeah, it's from going on walks, and when the wind blows, I'm getting the pollen from everybody else's trees that they planted. But it doesn't
And
have
you know,
to.
something you pointed out that again has stuck with me over the years, is that where do we put these plants? We put them outside schools, we put them outside hospitals, we create what you called pollen corridors, and then when we open the windows, especially at night, where does the pollen go? It comes floating in. Obviously, not at schools at night, but you know, we've got kids with asthma issues and allergies now. That number has gone up tremendously over the past few decades, hasn't it?
Well, the numbers are when I started researching this, allergies were about 10%. And prior to that, allergies had only been about 2% of the population. And by a decade ago, it was 38% of the population of the US had allergies. And I'm not even sure what it is now, but it keeps going up. And the percentage of kids getting asthma keeps going up. And everybody seems willing to pay this price, but there's aerobiologists in Australia who predict, because of what we plant and because of climate change and increases in carbon dioxide, which jack up pollen levels, that in 20 years, the air in the cities won't even be able, at times we won't even be able to breathe it. Nobody will be able to go out without some kind of big face mask or something. It's bizarre.
And there's a really good question that I want to get to. And again, we have about a minute, and we'll break in. I'm going to bring you back for a final segment. This conversation is too good. Audrey asks, but the pollen is important for honeybees, right? And what is your answer to that?
Pollen is wonderful, but pollen is like anything else. It's like a little bit is great and too much is bad. And the male clonal trees and shrubs that they plant in the cities, these produce nothing for the pollinators. The type of trees I like to see are female trees that have nectar sources, and the insects come to them heavily, and perfect flowered plants that are non-allergenic that feed the I mean, part of the reason we've lost so many butterflies and pollinators is because our trees that we plant are so often these sterile males. All they do is produce airborne pollen. They have no food source for birds, bees. There's no seeds. There's no fruit. There's no nectar. There's nothing.
All right, let's hold on to that thought. That's Tommy Ogren. We're talking about allergy-free gardening. We welcome your questions. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We'll be right swearing at anybody.
Okay, sounds good. It's on.
All right, great. We were talking here in the break about pollinators and double flowered plants. And do you have any information about that, Tommy?
I like double flowered plants because they produce less pollen.
Farmers markets are going through uncertain
and some plants that are highly doubled produce no pollen. A lot of the male parts become petals.
Right.
As far as the pollinators, most of your beautiful flowering plants and something, your apple trees and something, these are not an allergy problem. These aren't a big concern. I would like to see landscapes that had more edible things in them.
Me too.
Yeah, I totally like that, and I use them myself when I landscape anytime I can. If I can get a plum tree or a blueberry bush in the landscape or something, I do it. Out here, citrus is wonderful to use to landscape with, but I mean, the problem I see with landscaping is that everywhere it's like, okay, my degree was in ornamental horticulture, and everything was supposed to be ornamental, and But I look at the landscape in the city as more than should be a lot more than just ornamental. It should be functional and it should be pleasing. And if it could have fruit that we could eat, I think that that's terrific. And if it didn't produce a lot of pollen and make the people near it sick, that'd be wonderful too. And you were talking about where they plant these things. A lot of times the worst trees are planted.
AM 1590 and FM 95.9.
We drink champagne, some quarantine, binge watch episodes of Tiger King. We try to get tested for 7 long days, but we're not Tom Hanks or in the NBA. Well, I'm not the world's most paranoid guy, but I'm scared that the guy from Grubhub gave me corona. We're spreading corona.
Grubhub is not getting a lot of love right now in the world, are they? Welcome back to
the paranoid guy.
I know. There's some great lyrics there. And wait. I've got the names of that one was the Corona Lola, and it's by by a guy named Hugh on First, which I love. Get it? The
Hughes on First?
Hughes on First. It should be Hughes on First, but it's Hugh on First. So Hugh. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. I'm going to get through this quickly. I just want to say hi to some of our friends. Our tree guy friends are listening, Scott and Skeet. Hey, it's the Scott and Skeet Show from Bartlett Tree Experts. A great sponsor of the Mike Nowak Show. And they're following this, and they know the issues with pollen and trees. And we also had Kelsey Shaw from Possibility Place Nursery, and they sell native plants. And he said he was happy that we were doing this because it's an important conversation. So I'm really glad to hear that, and we've got your questions. We'll get to them. But first, welcome to the Keep Eating Healthy campaign on the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Let's start with the folks at Prairie Fruits Farm and Creamery in Champaign, Illinois. They remind you there's still 1 week left for American Cheese Month. They're featuring fresh chèvre, which is French for goat.
It's French for yummy cheese.
Yeah. They've got plain herbe de Provence, cracked peppercorn, or a seasonal flavor. Listen to this: pickled ramp and onion, sweet and sour pickled alliums added to their fresh chèvre, the perfect foil for rustic bread or a bagel with a slice of smoked salmon. I'll take it. Or you can try fresh whole goat's milk ricotta. They are flush with milk. Yeah, they have 110 goats. So they decided to add a ricotta to the production line up this week. Now, that we have our friends at Cedar Valley Sustainable Farm, CSA. They tell me they're a little tired, a little stressed, and a little overwhelmed. They're doing a lot of business right now, but feeding people locally is the most gratifying work they've ever done. Cedar Valley is a meat CSA. You can get beef, pork, chicken, and eggs, all humanely raised and drug and hormone free. You can even order custom butchered beef or pork. They feature safe social distancing pickup at various locations in and around Chicago. And of course, as I'm saying that, I'm touching my face. That's not a good thing. And it's Memorial Day weekend, which means that grilling season is here. So try Backyard Patch Herbs. They feature hand-blended herb mixes crafted with homegrown herbs, more than 35 varieties for everything from dill dip to salt-free ranch salad dressing to marinara and salsa, as well as meat rubs, marinades, and cheese spreads. Or get creative like my Kathleen did this week and create a fabulous polenta with the Backyard Patch Herbs. It was terrific. Don't forget, use the code MIKE10, M-I-K-E 10, and get a 10% discount. Keep on keeping health. Let's try that again. How about click on the Keep Eating Healthy logo at MikeNovak.net. Help us support these great farms while they support us. Go to MikeNovak.net for more details. It is the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're talking to Tom Ogren about allergy-free gardening. We've been talking trees. We only have a few minutes here in this final segment, but Peggy mentioned it, and I think we should. What other plants in your garden should you be aware of are producing pollen?
Oh, okay. So
bottle brush obviously is one that you talked about.
Which one?
Bottle brush.
Bottle brush. Yeah, bottle brush, if you don't keep it pruned, will produce quite a bit of allergenic pollen. I would say that the two, in your area, the plant I would be most concerned about would be yews, taxus.
You're not talking about me, not YOU, but YEW.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right, because, okay, everybody's got yews here.
Yes.
And it is considered the foundation plant, I think, as much as a juniper or a boxwood. I would say those are the big three, the big ugly three. And you rarely see the juniper berry. I mean, sorry, the yew berries, the little red berries, because they're selling the male clones, aren't they?
Right, and the problem is that when they bloom, they produce a lot of pollen. The pollen is very small. It's very light. It'll go right through bedroom windows. The yew, as you know, is a toxic plant. If a deer or a horse or a dog eats it, it'll die. The pollen is not only allergenic, but it's poisonous. And they plant these yews using males right under people's bedroom windows. The pollen comes through the window. They use yew to make a chemotherapy drug called Taxol for breast cancer. And people get that pollen from the male yews coming through their windows, and they get what sounds to me like chemotherapy treatments. And doctors don't understand what the problem is because people aren't aware of it. And the allergists don't skin test it because yew is poisonous and everybody would get a bad reaction. So they don't have any data, but the people get a hold of me. And the first thing I ask them is do you have any yews as foundation plants? And then I go outside and have a look and see if you have any berries on any of them. If you don't have any berries, you got a health problem. It's time to get the chainsaw out and dig up the stumps and plant. If you want the same look, plant another yew, but plant one with berries, plant a female. This is a huge problem for affecting loads of people, and it's off everybody's radar. But these people email me all the time, and I know what happens when we change it out. All of a sudden, they're better again.
I think
talk
you mentioned
about waking up with sore throats and stuff, and feeling irritable.
Jump in, Peggy.
I think you mentioned flowers like mums as well. We're very high on your list of pollen.
Okay, so like mums out in your yard, I think you could have thousands of mums in your garden and it really wouldn't be a problem. But when you cut them and you bring them in, if they're the type of mums that have an open face, and they will shed pollen, and mums, chrysanthemums are in the same family, the daisy family, which is the same as the ragweed family. And so the pollen grains of those are all spiky. They look like little grains of
coronavirus.
The cactus, yeah, and they tear you up. And so a lot of times there are certain cut flowers that don't cause any problems and some that do. But if you bring in something like that and they start shedding it all over the table, everything is about proximity with this. It's just like the COVID virus. If the further we stay apart from other people, the safer we are. And it's the same with these allergenic plants. If you plant a male tree in your yard, you're going to get 100, maybe 1,000 times more of that tree's pollen than the neighbors will.
Yeah,
you're just too close to it. And
and I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave it at that, because one more thing I just wanted to say, and go to my website, MikeNowak.net. This is all being exacerbated by climate change. As we get warmer and we pump more CO2 in the atmosphere, the plants respond, they produce more pollen. Tom Ogren, thank you so much. Go to allergyfreegardening.com. We're going to have you back on again very soon. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki.
Split.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, root and bacon. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good tools to make me.
Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. And
you've gone outside.
I've gone outside into my backyard. I took a photo of this the other day at dusk, and I put it up on Facebook, and I got like 200 likes on it. And I went, "Oh, okay, it's just."
It looks fabulous.
It's just my backyard, but it looks pretty good because the azaleas blooming in the foreground and the allium. on the over here. Oh, I see. I can't even point. And I like the way the microphone pops in and out of the image here when I do this. So
thank you, Zoom.
uh,
So what is blooming in your yard right now?
Oh my
for those
God,
who aren't watching.
Celandine poppy is blooming. My May apples they're past bloom, and they're producing the little May apples on the underside. There's some wild geranium that's blooming. Columbine is blooming. I love Columbine canadensis, which is the native columbine because it spreads.
None of mine came back. It all disappeared this
Really?
winter. All of every
Interesting.
last columbine is gone.
Oh, and I have a riot of columbine out in my front yard. I can't even tell you. I need to take a photo of the parkway and just show you what I've got there. There's just a lot going on. Everything is this is the yard looks the best at this time of year, really. I mean, I love it when we get the summer bloomers, but for some reason my yard looks better in the spring.
Yeah.
So that's what I've got, and other things that I can't even. I mean, the Joe Pyeweed is coming up. I've got one thing I've got to be careful about, and we got a landscaper on, and he'll be on next, and he'll be able to tell me this. I've got Solidago, goldenrod, coming up everywhere in the yard. Okay,
Canadensis or some of the others.
I don't know if there is a Canadensis Solidago.
The common one.
Yeah,
I might have the name of it.
Common goldenrod, and it reseeds itself like crazy.
Yeah.
You rip it, and I've ripped out whole chunks of it, and I just throw it in the corner.
It's that and jewelweed. My yard is full of jewelweed, especially with all this water. It's everywhere this year.
Yeah, and looking at the time, I don't even know. Okay, let's figure out the clock here because if I could find the clock, see, I got to get rid of this thing I've got here with my backyard so I can see what's going on. But I just wanted to mention really fast. We popped up a thing on Facebook this week. It was a story about lawns, and it was in the New York Times, an opinion piece. America's killer lawns, 40 million acres of lawn in America, and we can do a lot better than that, especially in the age of COVID-19, where we already have problems here. The last thing we need to be doing, and I'm watching on TV, I'm watching the lawn killer or the weed killer people saying, go out and get the poison, folks, because it's COVID-19. We need to spread more poison in our environment right now. And I want to just say, even or especially at this time, can we just let it go?
Yeah.
For a little bit? Just let some things grow a little bit and not worry about. You're already at risk from catching the coronavirus. Why make things worse by willy-nilly spraying stuff in your yard? So that would be my advice. We said on the show many times, when in doubt, rip it out. And I'm talking about lawns. Less lawn, more growing things, more natives, more vegetables. How about that? Don't you think that'd be a good way to go? All right, when we come back, it's been raining like crazy in the Midwest in the last few weeks, and it's causing problems. So we're going to talk about that with an architect, and a construction guy, and a landscaper. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy.
But you be sure to listen, learn, and laugh.
It's been 1 week since we quarantined. Said we'd all stay inside, need our groceries. 5 days since you FaceTime me, saying be symptom free or don't come and see me. 3 days since the living room became my office and my work moved to all Zoom. Yesterday you abandoned me, but it'll still be 2 months till we're out of quarantine. Wash your hands in the kitchen sink, don't wanna be the link that gives corona to your fellow man. I stocked up on tuna fish, it is a dish that lasts a year at a minimum if you can keep it in the can. Don't run your errands during peak times, avoid the long lines. I hope you tip delivery drivers. Good thing we still have Netflix, gotta watch Rabbit Tips, and hope Lugosi doesn't eat her. Gotta be a flickin' Miss Spring Break because Miami's in a break up on a college game who's contact to be safer.
That's a pretty good job on that song.
I know, the guy was working it. I'll tell you, I was looking at the video of this on the YouTubes, and the lyrics are by somebody at Danny Awesome. And of course, that's a parody of a Bare Naked Ladies song, 1 week of COVID-19. and he's working it. I mean, you could tell he's reading the script because it would be really hard to memorize that. But he was doing a really, really good job. So kudos to Danny Awesome.
Mr. Awesome.
Yeah, well, it's Dani, so it might have been a woman who
Ms.
did.
Ost.
Ms. Awesome, Mr. Awesome.
The awesome team.
Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki here in the middle west of call it the middle. We're the heartland here. We are smack in the middle of the country pretty much. Not exactly geographically, but close to it. Lately, we have been getting pounded by rain here in the Chicago area. We just crossed over. As you know, if you're listening to this in other parts of the country, some of you are getting this a week later, 6 days later. Today here in Chicago, it's May 24th, and we have already broken the rainfall record for our area, the O'Hare Airport. We're up over, what is it, 48 inches of rain, I believe. And I'm sorry, not 48.
Over 8.4, I think.
It's
8.4.
Yeah, not 48. I don't know where that came into my head. 8 point something.
For the month. You were thinking of probably for the year.
It's possible, but for the month, it's over 8 inches of rain. Which to some parts of the country doesn't see. You get 8 inches of rain in a rainstorm in the Pacific Northwest, and nobody says boo. But here, yeah, it wreaks havoc. And one of the places it wreaks havoc on is Lake Michigan, and by extension, all of the Great Lakes, which are approaching, if they're not already they're approaching record levels. This, and what's interesting, I was doing some reading about this. The Great Lakes are not quite, well, they're not the same as the oceans. If you're looking at the oceans, they're just steadily rising. That's easy to figure, okay? They're getting warmer and cooler. We know, we've talked to our meteorologist, Rick DeMaio, about warmth in certain parts of the ocean, especially Gulf of Mexico, where hurricanes form, and in the Atlantic. And the water level in the oceans just keeps rising. In the Great Lakes, it's a different story. There are different dynamics at work. We just several years ago came out of among the lowest levels ever, and now we're at the highest levels ever. And this can change depending on what happens in our local weather and our local climate over the course of a couple of years.
How much ice there is, how much snowfall.
Right. Ice plays a huge role in it, and reflectivity, and that whole dynamic is very interesting and tricky. And I'll tell you, Rick's explained it to us several times, and I still don't exactly get it how that works. And unfortunately, he's not here with us today because he is getting a well-deserved day off today. So next time we'll bring this in because the water levels are still going to be high. If you go to my website, MikeNowak.net, you will see a couple of photos that were taken by a listener at one of the beaches in Chicago, in the city of Chicago. And Chicago is right on Lake Michigan, has a lot of beaches. Some of them are large. These two are tiny. One was they're both in Rogers Park. One was Rogers Beach and one was Howard Beach. And they're basically postage stamp beaches, but they're gone now. They ceased to exist as of this past January because of storms that came in and were just pounding the shore and breaking up rocks, breaking up concrete, battering apartment buildings right on the lake. And some of these are right up to the shoreline. And the shoreline in many cases has disappeared. So this is what we're dealing with now. Again, and everything, the backdrop to everything that happens is the pandemic, COVID-19. So here we are, COVID-19. As we talked in the first hour, we got allergens all over the place. Climate change is help create more pollen in the air. Here in this part of the Midwest, another part, look at Michigan this week. They had 2 dams break. Flooding in Midland, Michigan. Mm-hmm. That's my home state. That's not very far from where I grew up. And they're having their own issues there. So it's not just us here, it's other parts of the country. So that takes us to the 2 guys that, and the point I was going to say is those beaches that disappeared in Rogers Park, my listener friend, Bob, not the Bob we've got on the line here now, but Bob sent me the photos and he said, "Hey, look at the work going on here." So I posted them on the website, and you can take a look at what it looked like in January. It's not going to get any better right now, folks, and that's why we have the two guys on the line here. Bob Bertog, the president of Bertog Landscape Company, which is locally in Wheeling. It's a family-owned business, and Roger Tietz from Gillen Marine Construction, and not a landscape architect, as I misspoke. Besides, and let me give a kudos to Peggy because she did name Solidago canadensis. She's right. That's the Solidago I have in my yard that's going to take over everything. So unless I start ripping it out. But so let's go to these two guys because they've worked together on projects, and let's start with Roger, since you're the superintendent and you're like the muscle guy here, I guess. You're moving the rocks and the soil. What are conditions like on the shore of Lake Michigan? You work in a couple of states in this area. What are you seeing on the shoreline?
Well, Mike, thanks for having me today. And I do have some landscape background, so you weren't incorrect.
Oh, great. Well, I'll give myself a name. How's that?
For landscape architecture, now I work with bigger rocks than before. But no, the lake is crazy. We were so used to low lake levels. Just 7 years ago, we were at an all-time low of 576.2. And now, only 7 years later, we're at 582.678 inches.
And that means above sea level, correct?
Above sea level, correct.
And I'll tell you, Roger, that doesn't sound like a huge difference, those numbers.
6 foot is not a big difference unless you put a 22-foot wave behind it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people were very comfortable for years with elevation, revetment elevations, shore protection elevations at 588, 589, but you put a 22-foot wave on top of it, you actually get overtopping. And many of those revetments that we've been very comfortable with for many years are now getting overtopped and destroyed because the waves just throwing it all over the beach.
Yeah. Well, nature has its own mindset, doesn't it? It doesn't really pay attention to what you're doing, does it?
No, not at all. And, a lot of the contributing factors was that we had no ice cover. Typically, we have shore ice that gives an additional buffer to those waves. But this year with the mild winter, we just didn't have it. So the wave came in full strength. And the other contributing factors are older revetment stone that's cracking up and breaking up, old limestone revetments that just aren't suitable. They've outlived their lifespan.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about this because there are different kinds of things you can do to mitigate erosion. I read one place that you got to be careful when you're just throwing rock into the lakeshore because it creates different currents and it redirects water in ways that are unpredictable. Have you encountered that?
Yeah, every day. It's really an engineered design. It has a coastal engineer that puts that design together. The toe of the revetments and the shore protection are founded all the way down to clay level, which is 577, 78. Mm-hmm. And we build those now higher than ever to 592 so that we can protect that big swing of lake elevation.
I love the fact that you just talk, it's all the sea level relatives because that's really the science of it, isn't it? It doesn't matter how relative it is at the shoreline. You need to know what you're dealing with in terms of sea level, don't you?
Correct. And, undercutting of those waves is such a huge factor. That's why we're losing so much sand at so many beaches. So the wave just down scours against those old revetments and pulls that sand out into the system. It takes a lot of time, and Mother Nature has to be kind to us to bring that sand back.
All right. Well, let's go to Bob Bertog then, because he's president of Bertog Landscaping or Landscape Company, sorry, in Wheeling. What can a landscaper do against a Great Lake?
Well, good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on. And basically, what happens is we work with Roger on a project, and he built the fortress, and we're there to beautify it on the other side of the water. So to soften some of the rocks that they put in, we actually put trees up on the wall itself, and we put in plants that are really strong as far as they can take the wind and the water and the sun, because there's no other protection out there. And if the water comes up and over the wall, which it does, there's going to be washouts. So we try and put plants in that have a very deep root structure, certain roses and certain grasses.
Yeah, and that obviously is one of the ways that you mitigate erosion is, and we've done it for a long time. In fact, you can do a laundry list of invasive plants that were brought into the country to control erosion, like kudzu and other things. But what kind of plants first of all, what kind of plants do you like to use to mitigate erosion, and are they really effective when we have these kinds of dramatic level changes?
Once they get established, a lot of the grasses, the marmon grasses, have a real deep rooting structure. They can take the spillover, but the project that we did last year, unfortunately, we lost a lot of the roses that we put in because they never had a chance to really take off. But over the years, if they have a chance, the Rosa rugosa has a deep rooting structure, and they can withstand a lot of the water that comes over. But like as Roger was saying, this is unprecedented times that we've seen. So we need Mother Nature to cooperate so we can get the plants put in, and then they can establish. And then if this happens again years down the road, hopefully they'll survive better. But the trees help too. We put willow trees up on the revetment walls. Roger brings in the soil. He actually brought the plants in on a barge because there's no other access to the beach other than through the barge. So we coordinated together. It was a great partnership, and hopefully we'll continue it.
Well, go ahead, Peggy.
I was going to say this might be getting in the weeds a little bit too much, but no pun intended. With all the extra rain, if you're reinforcing steep slopes, if you're reinforcing bluff areas, how are you with all the rain that we're getting and the saturation, and there's often a slump and a slide due to clay levels? Is that something you're taking into account with the plants, and how are you deciding species that way?
Well, I leave a lot of that to my landscape architects. I'm not a horticulturalist, and I don't have an architecture background, but I do have designers that have done work on the lakefront before, so I trust that their judgment is good too. And then the sand is very filtered, so the water does run off pretty quickly. It's just that this past winter, as Roger was saying, it was so strong, there was no ice. The water just came up and just basically uprooted a lot of the stuff that we put in last summer.
And I noticed, and we need to take a break here, but I noticed you talk about rugosa roses and willows. A few years ago when I went out east, I was on the ocean, and there were rugosas everywhere. So is that why, Bob? Was I witnessing a strategy to hold back the banks?
The strategy is two-part, actually, especially in a residential setting, because people tend to wander into private beaches. So the roses are
I tell you what, I probably should have asked that question right then.
Okay.
All right, we'll finish it when we come back. Bob Bertog from Bertog Landscape Company, Roger Tietz from Gillen Marine Construction. It's the mic. Fine.
Keeping you live.
Okay. So we're still going out over Facebook.
Yes.
Our audio. We are not on the radio, but we are on Facebook right now. So when we come back, I want to ask about the rugosas, and you mentioned willows too, because a lot of people are terrified of willows because of their roots and how they go chasing water. And it seems to me that I hadn't thought about it, but this might be the perfect plant to put on a lakeside or near a body of water, so you can hold on to the structure of your land. Is that what you're thinking of, Bob?
Exactly. Plus, it was a favorite of the client that we worked at. It was a special plant for them. So Roger's guys were able to actually, when we built the revetment, they made a surface area where they can actually put a chair up on top right next to the willow tree.
And here's the upside that is not particularly relevant to our conversation, but willows are one of those trees that support a lot of native fauna, insects, caterpillars. They're like oaks. They are things that will help our bird population because there are so many insects crawling around on willows. So willows have it's an upside, it's a downside. Folks are often afraid of having willows get into their pipe system, the roots. But as I tell folks, they don't crack into pipes. They only take advantage of flaws in them, and they're opportunistic. They're just seeking water.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've dealt with that before, and I'll bet Roger you have as well.
No, absolutely. It's important that we work with someone like Bob. Not only does it make the jobs go smoother, but taking into account the aesthetic pleasing things that people want to see on the lakefront. You just don't want a pile of rocks there, and it's important to work with someone like Bob and his company to make that happen.
Yeah, the two. And when we come back here from this break, I want to talk about what the steps are in a remediation. Maybe you can talk about this one home that you worked on together. Let's get a little background on the one home, because I'm kind of interested. Something's collapsing in the lake. How do you start? Where do you even begin to address a problem like that? So we've got about a minute left before we come back. Give that some thought, and we'll talk about that when we come back in. But we'll pick up on the rugosas and the willows. 11 on 1590 and 95.9.
COVID-19, yeah, you're scary and mean. Gotta self-quarantine, cancel everything. COVID-19, you're all I've got on my screen. It's an introvert's dream to self-quarantine.
Yeah, just a guy at his piano there doing that. There's some good ones out there. Some of them are really well. And he just set up the microphone. It looked like a piano, and he went to town. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're talking about lake levels. We're talking about soil erosion on a lake. When we last left, we were talking to Bob Bertog from Bertog Landscape Co. in Wheeling, and Roger Tietz from Gillen Marine Construction, and we were talking about rugosa roses with Bob, and I mentioned how I'd seen them along the ocean on the East Coast, and believe me, they were everywhere. I remember at one point, this was right on.
Is this on Cape Cod?
Yeah, in that area. Yeah, it was near Cape Cod, and there were a bunch of rugosas, and the rose hips were the size of golf balls.
Wow.
So somebody had a golf club there, and I was hitting rugosa hips into the sea. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. It was, and sometimes you hit them and they would just explode, and then sometimes they would I could knock them into the ocean. So that I heartily encourage it for people who are bored and they need something to do with
their golf fix. Yes.
With the rugosa rose hips. But I was mentioning them here. Do they help with erosion control, Bob?
They do. And they're a deep rooting plant. And then they also are, from another perspective, people tend to walk a straight line, shortest distance between 2 points. And that means they're walking over private beaches. Well, you'll walk through rugosa roses only once in your lifetime and you'll never do it again. You'll walk around because they are very thorny. And back to your point, during the break, you were saying they also good for fauna because other smaller animals and stuff are protected within those roses.
Oh, that's great. It's like a hedgerow.
Correct.
But what I was referring to is the willows. And a lot of people are terrified of planting willows because their roots are always searching for water and they get into the pipes and that sort of thing. But in this case, a willow might be an advantage on a lakeshore.
Absolutely.
So these are some of the mitigation strategies. All right. So what you guys worked on a project together. Was this last year?
Yes.
Okay. So that was even before it got worse than it was at the time. It's worse now. Roger, you're looking, tell me about the shape of the land around this house. What did you have to concern yourself with when you were called upon to do this job?
Well, we had the opportunity to meet with a client there that had very little protection in front of his boathouse. So this was a secondary home to his home, and we met early on with Bob and his team and the owner to develop some of the ideas. The second step would be that we call in a coastal engineering company. In this case, it was Shabik and Associates. The team was put together. We work with the client. We develop what needs to be done. Then some months later, after all the permits are required, there's about 5 different permitting agencies, Corps of Engineers, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the EPA, and then of course the local government bodies that all want a piece of the action. After those permits are approved, then Bob and I work together with the client to develop, the aesthetic ends of things, the plantings within the revetment stone. It was just a pleasure working with Bob and his team.
Well, let's talk about the revetment stone. It's not just a matter of just piling stone there. Obviously, there's soil involved, there's sand involved. How do you determine what's needed at what point?
Well, the coastal engineering company develops an engineered drawing. We actually have survey points that we live by. Those are, we start with a protective shape, the height of the crest of the revetment, the crest of the offshore breakwall, making sure that they're all suitable heights. But we use a quartzite stone as our armor layer, and those armor stones are between 2 and 6 tons each, and those are put, towed into the clay elevation, and then built and stacked in such a way that they resist the wave energy. So they're not just a pile of stone like many people think. You just don't bring a dump truck over and throw it over the edge.
Well, you're right. I think this is what people think you do. You just pile the stone and walk away and you're done. And, I was looking, if you go to my website, MikeNowak.net, I got those 2 photos from my listener, Bob. They show those huge stones with the many ton, there's 2 like on a truck, I think. That's about all you can fit. But there's smaller stone as well.
Yep. The internal layer of stone is engineered in its size so that the core layer stone doesn't pop through the voids of the armor layer.
Okay.
And this is hard rock, quartzite or granite that is used these days. Corps of Engineers improved for its strength, its durability, and its freeze thaw effect. Limestone and dolomites were used in many years prior to this, where that tends to break up from the freeze and thaw. You end up with a pile of smaller stones, which of course the waves like to toss around.
Yeah, I'll bet you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we've got the stone, and what about Bob, the soil that comes in afterward?
The soil Roger brought in on the barge, we really only needed the soil for the willow tree, and he brought it in big barrels of the tow bags, and then the roses and stuff are fine in the sandy. So you can just plant those straight in the sand. And his operator was phenomenal. Smokey would put things wherever we wanted it. If I needed more sand, he'd put more sand in an area. He lifted the tree in there like it was lifting a baby out of a crib. It was amazing. And it's an 8-inch willow tree. So it's probably, it was probably 30 feet tall. And yeah, it was very heavy. But his guys were great to work with. And we just, if we had issues, if we were in their way, we would move, and vice versa. It was just a good partnership.
Let me ask you about Caliper for a second, because a lot of the advice you get for home gardens is don't go for the large Caliper tree, because the smaller one will catch up just as fast and might even have a better chance of success. Why are you using such a large Caliper tree?
Because of the force of the waves, we couldn't afford to put in a smaller one. And I think the way the waves were crashing right up into the revetment, it would have taken the tree out. So, and the client had a willow tree there prior that was probably close to 20 inches. So we wanted to get them something right out of the gate that they didn't have to wait for it to get bigger. And we knew with it coming in on a barge and with the equipment that Roger had, it wouldn't be a problem to get it up on the revetment.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And it was just one tree?
One willow tree, but then there were probably 300 or 400 plants that we put smaller stuff on.
Like, for instance?
Like the roses and the grasses.
Okay.
And the homeowner had collected seeds. He was really into his beach, and he harvested seeds every fall. So he put in thousands of seeds of smaller grasses and stuff. And they all came in. It was really nice until the winter came.
So what happened? Yeah, tell us about this past winter. What effect did it have on your job?
The wind was so strong coming, and there was, as Roger mentioned, there was no ice to help block it. So the water was just coming up and over the wall. And we had a lot of snow this winter. You wouldn't know it because most of it just melted, but there was actually a lot of snow.
It was all on Halloween.
Yeah.
When we had most of our snow.
So we did have an average winter for snowfall. And the fact that the lake was just so rough the whole winter, and Mother Nature did not cooperate, especially on our side of the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That lack of ice, you just kept getting wave after wave after wave all winter.
Yeah, and Peggy knows because she's very close to the lake there. And Roger, when you look at the job now, do you feel like you need to go back and mitigate anything?
Well, we are going to make some modifications. We're working with Bob and the owner now to strengthen some of the areas that we thought we could remain accessible. The owner wanted to have not only a stairway down from his upper tableland, but
good luck with that.
Well, it worked out well. The stairway survived, but what we thought where the sand could remain, that's been undermined and washed away. So we're going to make some improvements.
All right, we got like 30 seconds. Do you guys, in addition to private contracting, do you work for municipalities as well, or government agencies?
Yeah, from Gillen Marine, we've done quite a bit of harbor construction, 31st Street Harbor. We've done a lot of work in Waukegan Harbor. We do offshore intake work. We're working for a number of the municipalities for their erosion problems as well.
And you, Bob?
It depends on the project. Every project is different. If it's a prevailing wage job, we typically stay away from that. But oftentimes, if it's considered a maintenance, it's not prevailing wage, and we'll be able to put our 2 cents in.
All right, Bob Bertog, Roger Tietz, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. We appreciate it. Go to MikeNowak.net for more information. Peggy,
don't spill your coffee.
I see trees of green and red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies.
Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. I found that one. That is just a lovely song, a lovely version of What a Wonderful World by a band called 5 Times August. And I guess the brains behind that is a guy named Brad Skistimus. And I was going through it, and it was under the COVID things. And he was just playing it straight. I mean, it's no joke. It's no parody.
No COVID, no nothing.
And a ukulele.
Yeah.
And you cannot listen to a ukulele and not smile. And I thought, that's how I want to wrap it up today, is play something a little more serious. Not even serious. It's just delightful. It's just a wonderful version of it. I've saved that song. I'm going to have to play. That goes into the regular rotation once we get out of this mess. I'm going to be.
Yeah, and it's still spring, and it's still May, and everything's in bloom despite everything else happening.
And all the pollen is flying around everywhere. I feel sorry for all those people with allergies. Well, including you. Welcome to the Keep Eating Healthy campaign on the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Let's run down the list of our favorite places. The folks at Prairie Fruits Farm and Creamery in Champaign, Illinois. Remind you, there's still a week left for American Cheese Month. They're featuring fresh chèvre, plain, these are the different flavors you can get. Plain, herbe de Provence, cracked peppercorn, or a seasonal flavor this week, pickled ramp and onion, which is sweet and sour pickled alliums added to their fresh chèvre, the perfect foil for rustic bread or a bagel with a slice of smoked salmon. That just sounds fantastic. Or try fresh whole goat's milk ricotta. They are flush with milk, so they decided to add a ricotta to the production line. Now, the folks at Cedar Valley Sustainable Farm CSA, they're out there hustling. Man, they are working hard, and they say they're a little tired, but that's okay because business is booming. And they say that feeding people locally is the most gratifying work they've ever done. Kudos to them. Now, Cedar Valley is a meat CSA. You can get beef, pork, chicken, and eggs, all humanely raised and drug and hormone free. You can even order custom butchered beef or pork. They feature safe social distancing, pickup at various locations in and around Chicago. And if you're not in Chicago, some of these places, like you can order from Prairie Fruits Farm and Creamery, or go to your local. Well, and I also should mention you can order from Backyard Patch Herbs coming up next. But go to a local place and get something in your neck of the woods and help out a small farmer trying to get through this crisis. And speaking of Memorial Day, grilling season is here. Backyard Patch Herbs, as I mentioned, they feature hand-blended herb mixes crafted with homegrown herbs. More than 35 varieties for everything from dill dip to salt-free ranch salad dressing to marinara and salsa, as well as meat rubs, marinades, and cheese spreads. Or, as I mentioned earlier, Kathleen got creative and came up with a fabulous polenta with Backyard Patch Herbs. Don't forget, you can call them or go online and use the code MIKE10, M-I-K-E 10, and get a 10% discount. Keep on eating healthy. Help us support these great farms while they support us. Go to MikeNovak.net for more details. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, and we are still in May. We still got a week left. We've already set the record for rain. Michigan is getting pounded. Other states are getting pounded. Indiana's getting pounded. It's unbelievable. What did you find some numbers for us, Peg?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And let's mention Rick DeMile's not here today. If you were tuning in to hear Rick DeMile, he got the day off. He's going to a virtual graduation. I get it. It's like, sure, knock yourself out, go for it. So, and it's a shame. It's a beautiful day. It's got to be a virtual graduation. Anyway, Go ahead, Peggy.
Yeah, so I don't have all of the reports up, but according to the National Weather Service, obviously we had the scattered strongest severe thunderstorms depended where you were in the area.
Sure.
It's wind damage, large hail. There was at least 2 tornadoes yesterday that touched down. One was near Manuka, which is south of the city, near the Kendall-Grundy-Will County border. The other was northwest of Hampshire in far northwest Kane County. And they think there might have been up to 2 to 3 additional tornadoes in Ogle and DeKalb counties. Again,
that's what I was seeing. There were tornadoes, and I was watching on TV, and they had the little tornado icons. Now that's not the official notification from the National Weather Service, but it's what I saw on the screen of reports of tornadoes, and there were a few in Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana. So it was a busy day yesterday.
A lot of wind damage yesterday too. And
was there?
Near Joliet, there's a lot of wind damage, and I guess the strongest areas that we had the rain yesterday, up to 2 to 3 inches localized. Indiana, and I'm sure Randall can chime in on some of this, but Indiana, we had a lot of sections over 2 to 3 inches of rain, 2.86 near Valparaiso, for example. Hail in Indiana. And there was also sections, though, of further north, like in McHenry County, that had 2 to 3 inches. At least some areas were slightly heavier than that.
And we should mention our engineer, Randall. We got 2 engineers here because our show is a handful. No single engineer can handle us. Randall, in addition to living in Indiana and schlepping into Illinois to engineer the show, is also a storm chaser. I always say to him, dude, what are you doing? But
Chasing storms.
He is. He's chasing storms. And Michael is also on the board. And I just wanted to give a shout out because at the end of last week, we wrapped things up so fast. At the end of and there's Basil. Basil the dog is here. All right, let's get
He's
everybody
chiming in too. Where's Legata? Where's your cat?
She's not here. I don't know where she is. I think she's outside or upstairs.
I heard somebody was looking for a weather report.
We were just mentioning that you got pounded with rain in Indiana yesterday, and maybe even some tornado activity.
Yeah, there was some rotation around Lowell. I don't think we had anything drop, but it was real interesting, and the bigger hail around Cherville was kind of cool to watch.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for being safe, and thank you for getting us up on the air last year when Zoom melted down completely. It was
last Sunday, yeah.
Last Sunday, I'm sorry. It was just insane. So you guys did yeoman's work. I want to thank everybody on the show today. Tom Ogren, go to allergy-freegardening.com. Want to thank Bob Bertog and Roger Tietz, and of course Randall and Michael and Kayla and Hannah and Kathleen in the background and Gata wherever and Basil. Until next time, go green or
go home.
What?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.